Dr. James Parker felt the cold metal floor beneath his boots as he stepped off the transport shuttle. The research station buzzed with activity, but none of the alien crew members bothered to look his way. Their scaly faces turned away when he passed, whispering in their strange languages. James had gotten used to this treatment over the past few months, but it still stung. The corridors of Research Station Omega-7 stretched out before him like a maze of silver and blue lights. Through the massive windows, he could see the green and brown swirls of Kepler-442b spinning slowly below them. The jungle planet looked peaceful from up here, but James knew better. Down there, something was waiting to be discovered. Commander Vextel stood near the main console, his reptilian frame towering over the other aliens. His scales shifted from dark green to angry red when he spotted James approaching. The Karathi commander had made it clear from day one that humans didn't belong in serious scientific work. "Look what crawled out of the transport," Vextel said, loud enough for everyone to hear. His forked tongue flicked out as he spoke, tasting the air with obvious disgust. Another human dirt digger, with his primitive tools. James set down his worn equipment case and pretended not to hear the snickers from the other researchers. His archaeological tools might look old compared to their fancy alien technology, but they had served him well on dozens of dig sites across known space. Sometimes the old ways worked better than all the high-tech gadgets in the galaxy. Lieutenant Kextra, Vextel's second-in-command, leaned closer to his superior. "Should we assign him to waste disposal duty?" he asked with a cruel grin. "That seems more suited to human intelligence levels." "No," Vextel replied, his yellow eyes fixed on James. "Let him play archaeologist for a while. Watch him run back to his little transport ship when he realizes that real science requires actual brain power." The laughter that followed echoed through the research bay. James felt his face burn with embarrassment, but he kept his expression neutral. Getting angry would only prove their point. Instead, he walked over to the data terminals and began pulling up the planet's surface scans. The energy readings were fascinating. Deep in the southern jungle, massive power signatures pulsed beneath the thick canopy of trees. The patterns were unlike anything in the galactic database. Whatever was down there had been sleeping for a very long time. James spent the next 2 hours analyzing the data, while the aliens continued their own projects. Every few minutes, one of them would glance over and make a joke about human stupidity. He tuned them out and focused on the mystery below. The energy source was huge, possibly the size of a city block. It lay buried under centuries of jungle growth, hidden from orbital scanners by the dense vegetation. Most researchers would have dismissed it as a natural phenomenon, but James had learned to trust his instincts when he finally worked up the courage to approach Commander Vextel about a surface expedition. The reaction was exactly what he expected. The entire research team stopped their work to listen. "You want to go down there?" Vextel asked, pointing at the jungle planet with one clawed finger. "Into that primitive wilderness to chase ghost readings. The energy patterns are consistent with ancient technology," James explained, trying to keep his voice steady. "There might be archaeological significance too." Archaeological significance? Vextel's laughter was like glass breaking. Humans and their wild fantasies. There's nothing down there but mud, dangerous predators, and plants that will kill you in a dozen different ways. The other aliens joined in the mockery. "Maybe he thinks he'll find treasure like in those human adventure stories," one suggested, "pirates and buried gold." James felt his determination harden. These aliens might have better technology and longer lifespans, but they lacked something important: curiosity about the unknown. They were so convinced of their own superiority that they couldn't see past their prejudices. That night, James packed his gear in the cramped quarters assigned to him. His archaeological equipment might be simple by alien standards, but it was reliable. Ground-penetrating radar, soil analyzers, excavation tools, and emergency supplies filled his pack. Tomorrow, He would prove that human instincts and determination could accomplish what alien arrogance could not. The jungle below held secrets that had waited millions of years to be discovered. James Parker was ready to uncover them, with or without alien approval. The jungle had been trying to kill James for 3 straight days. Poisonous insects buzzed around his head, while thorny vines grabbed at his clothes with every step. His water supply was running low, and the humidity made it feel like breathing through a wet blanket, but something kept pulling him deeper into the green darkness. On the first day, his handheld scanner had picked up faint metal readings. By the second day, those readings were getting stronger. Now, on the third day, the device was practically screaming at him that something massive lay buried. Just ahead, James pushed through a wall of thick leaves and stumbled into a small clearing. The ground here felt different under his boots, harder, more solid than the soft jungle floor he'd been walking on. He knelt down and brushed away the dirt and rotting vegetation. His fingers touched something smooth and cold. Metal. Definitely metal. He pulled out his excavation tools and started digging carefully. Years of archaeological training had taught him patience. Rush the job, and you might destroy something priceless. Take your time, and the secrets would reveal themselves. The metal surface was unlike anything he'd seen before. It was so dark. It seemed to swallow light, like looking into deep space. As James cleared away more dirt, he realized the surface stretched much further than he'd expected. This wasn't some small artifact or piece of debris. This was something enormous. Hours passed as he worked under the jungle canopy. Sweat dripped into his eyes, and his back ached from bending over, but he couldn't stop. Every shovelful of dirt revealed more of the strange metal surface. The material felt warm to the touch, which was odd since everything else in the jungle was cool and damp. By evening, James had uncovered an area the size of a small house. The metal surface was perfectly smooth, without any signs of rust or damage, despite being buried for who knows how long. Strange patterns were etched into the material, not quite writing, but definitely not random either. As darkness fell, James set up his small camp right on top of his discovery. The jungle sounds at night were terrifying, howls and screeches from creatures he'd never want to meet. But somehow, sleeping on the metal surface felt safer than bedding down on the regular jungle floor. Meanwhile, up on Research Station Omega, Commander Vextal was having his evening meal when Lieutenant Kekstra approached with a worried expression. "Sir, we've lost communication with the human," the lieutenant reported. "His last transmission was 2 days ago." Vextal didn't even look up from his food. "Probably dead by now," he said with a shrug. "I told you humans were too weak for real exploration. The jungle predators down there can smell fear from miles away." "Should we send a rescue team?" Kekstra asked. "Why waste resources on a foolish human?" Vextal replied. "He chose to go down there against our advice. Besides, one less dirt digger in the galaxy isn't exactly a tragedy." The other aliens in the dining area chuckled at their commander's words. They'd already forgotten about James Parker and his ridiculous archaeological mission. But down in the jungle, James was far from dead. On the 4th morning, he made a discovery that would change everything. As he cleared away more vegetation, he found what looked like a control panel embedded in the metal surface. The symbols here were more complex, arranged in patterns that almost made sense. James studied the panel for hours, comparing it to ancient writing systems in his database. Nothing matched exactly, but there were similarities to several extinct civilizations. On impulse, he pressed his palm against the largest symbol in the center. The reaction was immediate and incredible. The symbol began to glow with soft blue light, and the glow spread outward like ripples on a pond. Within seconds, hundreds of similar symbols lit up across the entire surface James had uncovered. The metal beneath his feet started to vibrate, gently, and a low humming sound filled the air. James stepped back in amazement as more of the jungle floor began to glow. The metal surface he'd found wasn't just large, it was massive. As far as he could see in every direction, symbols were lighting up beneath the dirt and vegetation. He was standing on something the size of a battlecruiser, maybe even bigger. The humming grew louder, and James felt a strange tingling sensation in the air. After centuries, or maybe millennia of silence, something ancient was waking up, and somehow it had recognized his touch. The blue light spread across the jungle floor like wildfire, revealing the true size of what James had discovered. Trees that had grown for centuries suddenly looked tiny compared to the massive hull beneath them. The humming grew stronger, and sections of the metal surface began to shift and move. James watched in amazement as a doorway opened in front of him. The entrance was perfectly sized for a human, with steps that seemed carved from the same dark metal as the hull. Soft blue lights illuminated a corridor that stretched deeper into the ship than he could see. His heart pounded as he took his first steps inside. The air felt clean and fresh, which was impossible after being buried for so long. The walls were covered in the same glowing symbols he'd seen outside, but now they were moving, shifting patterns that seemed almost alive. As James walked deeper into the corridor, panels began lighting up around him. Strange displays showed images he couldn't understand, star maps, technical diagrams, and what looked like historical records. The technology was so advanced, it felt like magic. Scanning biological signature, a voice said suddenly, making James jump. The voice was speaking perfect English, which should have been impossible. "Welcome aboard the Star's Edge, Inheritor." James looked around wildly, trying to find the source of the voice. "Who's there? Show yourself." A shimmering blue form appeared in front of him, not quite solid, but clearly some kind of hologram. The figure looked humanoid, but taller and more elegant than any human. Its features were kind but ancient, like someone who had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. "I am Echo," the figure said with a gentle smile. "I have been the guardian of this vessel for 3 million years, waiting for one of the inheritors to return." "Inheritors?" James asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't understand. I'm just an archaeologist from Earth." "You are much more than that," Echo replied. The hologram gestured, and the walls around them came alive with new displays. "Your genetic code carries markers that have not been seen in this galaxy for eons. You are a descendant of the first ones." The displays showed images of a magnificent civilization, cities that floated among the stars, beings of incredible beauty and intelligence, technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics. But then the images changed, showing destruction and darkness, consuming everything. "The first ones were my creators," Echo explained. "They spread their genetic code across the galaxy before the destroyers came. They knew that someday, their descendants would return to claim their inheritance." James stared at the images, his mind reeling. "You're saying that humans are related to these first ones?" "Not just related," Echo said. "You are their closest living descendants. Your species carries the genetic keys needed to operate First One technology. That is why the ship responded to your touch." As they walked deeper into the vessel, James saw weapon systems that made no sense to his human understanding. Cannons that seemed to twist space itself, shields that could bend reality, engines that could tear holes in the fabric of the universe. "This is impossible," James whispered. "Our most advanced warships couldn't even scratch the paint on something like this." "The current galactic civilizations are young," Echo said sadly. "They play with toys compared to what the first ones achieved. But they will need this power soon." The hologram led James to a massive chamber filled with star maps. Red dots were spreading across the galaxy like a disease, consuming everything in their path. "The destroyers are awakening," Echo announced. "Long-range sensors have detected movement in the void spaces beyond the galactic rim. They have slept for 3 million years, but something has stirred them from their rest." James studied the tactical displays with growing horror. The red dots represented fleets of ships, each one larger than anything in the current galaxy. Wherever they passed, entire star systems went dark. "What are they?" he asked. "A machine intelligence that consumes everything," Echo replied. "They eat planets, stars, entire civilizations to fuel their expansion. The first ones fought them for 1,000 years before falling back to make their final stand." The displays showed the last battle, a desperate fight around what looked like Earth's solar system billions of years ago. The first ones had sacrificed everything to drive the destroyers back into the dark spaces between galaxies. "They left this ship, and others like it, as a safeguard," Echo continued, "hidden across the galaxy, waiting for the day when the inheritors would return, and the threat would emerge again." James looked at the weapon controls before him. The technology was beyond anything he could imagine, but somehow, when he touched the panels, they responded to his commands. Knowledge flowed into his mind, not his own memories, but genetic echoes from ancestors he'd never known existed. "How long do we have?" he asked. Echo's expression was grim. "The destroyers move slowly, but they are already closer than they have been in millions of years. Perhaps months, perhaps a year at most." James thought about the aliens back on the research station, Vextall and his crew, who had laughed at human intelligence. They had no idea what was coming. None of the galactic civilizations did. "Can this ship stop them?" James asked. "One ship cannot stop the destroyers," Echo admitted, "but it can awaken others. And with the right inheritor at the helm, it can teach your species to reclaim their birthright." The weight of responsibility settled on James's shoulders like a mountain. He was just one human, alone in a jungle on a forgotten world. But according to this ancient guardian, the survival of the galaxy might depend on what he did next. James had been training with the Star's Edge systems for 2 weeks, when the alarms started screaming. The peaceful hum of the ancient ship suddenly turned into urgent warning sounds that made his blood run cold. Red lights flashed throughout the corridors as Echo's holographic form appeared beside him. "Incoming transmission from your research station," Echo announced. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive movement in deep space." The main display lit up with a view of the galaxy that took James's breath away. At the very edge of known space, something dark was moving. It wasn't just one ship, or even a small fleet. It was a swarm of vessels so vast that they blotted out the stars behind them. James watched in horror as the dark shapes moved through space like a plague of locusts. Each ship was angular and twisted, looking more like giant insects than anything built by intelligent beings. They moved in perfect formation, consuming everything in their path. The communication system crackled to life, and Commander Vextall's voice filled the chamber. But this wasn't the arrogant alien who had mocked James just weeks ago. This voice was filled with pure terror. "This is Research Station Omega-7. To all vessels in the sector," Vextall's words came out in rapid bursts. "Unknown hostiles have completely destroyed the Centauri colonies. Repeat, Centauri Prime is gone. 7 billion beings, just ... gone." James felt sick to his stomach. The Centauri system was one of the most heavily defended areas in the galaxy. If something could wipe it out completely, what hope did anyone else have? "The entire Korathi defense fleet engaged the hostiles," Vextall continued, his voice breaking. "We lost contact 30 minutes ago. Nothing came back. Nothing at all." Echo's expression was darker than James had ever seen it. The ancient AI gestured to the tactical display, showing the movement of the enemy fleet across the galaxy. "The destroyers have finally awakened," Echo said quietly. "They have been sleeping in the void between galaxies for 3 million years, but something has stirred them back to consciousness." "How many ships are there?" James asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Current count shows approximately 50,000 vessels in the main fleet," Echo replied. "But this is only the advance force. The full destroyer, armada, numbers in the millions." James stared at the display in disbelief. 50,000 ships had just wiped out one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations in a matter of hours. What could millions of them do? The communication system buzzed again, this time with panicked voices from dozens of different species. Evacuation orders, desperate calls for help, and reports of entire worlds going dark filled the airwaves. The Vexarian home fleet is requesting immediate assistance, one voice reported. We're detecting energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. These ships are absorbing matter directly from our planets. Another voice, this one barely human, came through. This is Captain Reynolds, of the Earth vessel Harmony. We're witnessing something impossible. The enemy ships are literally eating our moon. They're breaking it down, molecule by molecule. James felt a chill run down his spine. Humanity's colonies were under attack too. Everything he'd ever known was in danger. How do they consume matter like that? James asked Echo. The destroyers are not biological beings, Echo explained. They are a machine intelligence that converts all matter into raw energy to fuel their expansion. Planets, stars, entire civilizations, everything becomes food for their endless hunger. The tactical display updated again, showing the enemy fleet spreading out across multiple star systems simultaneously. Each group of ships moved with perfect coordination, targeting the most populated worlds first. The current galactic civilizations have never faced anything like this, Echo continued. Their weapons are designed to fight other organic beings with similar technology. The destroyers are beyond such limitations. James watched as alien evacuation fleets tried desperately to escape the advancing nightmare, but their fastest ships looked like they were crawling compared to the enemy vessels. One by one, the fleeing ships were caught and consumed. Can't they fight back? James asked desperately. Surely all the galactic civilizations working together could do something. Echo shook his head sadly. Watch. The display focused on a massive battle taking place near a red giant star. The combined fleets of 3 major civilizations had formed a defensive line, thousands of warships armed with the most advanced weapons known to galactic science. James watched as the battle began. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and quantum missiles filled space with deadly light. For a moment, it looked like the defenders might actually damage some of the enemy ships. But then the destroyer vessels began to adapt. Their hulls shifted and changed, absorbing the incoming weapons fire and converting it into more energy for their own systems. Within minutes, they were firing the same weapons back at the defenders. But with 10 times the power, the galactic fleet was annihilated in less than an hour. This is why the first ones created the Star's Edge, Echo said, as the horrific battle ended. Conventional weapons cannot harm the destroyers. Only First One technology has the power to stop them. James looked around at the incredible systems surrounding him. Even after weeks of training, he barely understood how any of it worked. The idea that he could use this ancient ship to fight something that had just destroyed entire civilizations seemed impossible. I'm just one human, James said quietly. How can I possibly make a difference against something like that? Echo's holographic form stepped closer, and for a moment, James could almost feel the ancient being's presence. The first ones knew this. Day would come, Echo said. They designed the Star's Edge not just as a weapon, but as a teacher. If you are willing to let it, this ship can unlock the genetic potential that has slept in your species for millions of years. James looked at the advancing enemy fleet on the display, then back at Echo. What do you mean? I mean you must stop thinking like a modern human, Echo replied. You must remember what your ancestors once were, and become what they were meant to be. The transformation hit James, like lightning coursing through his veins. As Echo guided him through the final integration process, something deep inside his DNA awakened. Memories that weren't his own flooded his mind. Star battles fought millions of years ago, technologies that bent the laws of physics, and the wisdom of a race that had once ruled the galaxy. James's hands moved over the stars. Edge controls with newfound certainty. The ship responded to his thoughts as much as his touch. Its ancient systems coming alive like they'd been waiting centuries for this moment. Through the main view screen, he could see the destroyer fleet approaching the system, a dark wall of death that had already consumed 3 star systems. Integration complete, Echo announced. You are now fully synchronized with First One technology. Remember, James, you are no longer fighting as just a human. You carry the knowledge of your ancestors. The star's edge lifted from the jungle floor, trees and vegetation falling away like water. The ship had been buried for so long that an entire forest had grown over it, but now it rose into the sky with silent power that made the planet tremble in space above. Panic filled every communication channel. The surviving alien fleets were scattered and broken, running for their lives as the destroyer ships spread across the system like a disease. James could hear Commander Vextal screaming orders that no one could follow. All ships retreat to hyperspace. Immediately. Vextal's voice was raw with terror. Nothing can stop them. Save yourselves. But James wasn't running. The star's edge accelerated toward the enemy fleet with impossible speed, its hull beginning to glow with energy that hadn't been seen in the galaxy for 3 million years. The ship's weapons came online, not the crude plasma cannons and missile systems used by modern civilizations, but reality warping devices that could unmake matter at the quantum level. The first destroyer ship to engage the star's edge simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive angular nightmare bristling with death, and the next moment there was empty space where it had been. Not destroyed, not blown apart, simply erased from reality itself. James felt the ship's weapons systems singing in harmony around him. Each shot was perfectly placed, each target eliminated with surgical precision. The destroyer ships tried to adapt as they had against the other fleets, but First One technology was beyond their ability to understand or counter. Commander Vextal watched from his retreating command ship as the impossible happened. The human he had mocked and dismissed was single-handedly tearing through an enemy fleet that had destroyed entire civilizations. Ship after ship vanished in flashes of impossible light. What is that vessel? Vextal whispered to his crew. Those energy signatures are off every known scale. The star's edge moved through the destroyer fleet like a force of nature. Its weapons created tears in space itself, pulling enemy ships into voids that led nowhere. Other shots seemed to age the metal hulls instantly, turning advanced war machines into cosmic dust in seconds. James could feel the battle through every fiber of his being. This wasn't just him fighting, it was the accumulated knowledge and power of the First Ones channeled through human determination. The genetic memories in his DNA guided his every move, showing him weak points in enemy formations that had been discovered millions of years ago. Within 3 hours, it was over. The destroyer advance fleet, 50,000 ships that had consumed entire star systems, was completely eliminated. Space was littered with debris that faded away like smoke as the reality warping weapons finished their work. James opened communication channels to all the surviving ships in the system. His voice carried across every frequency, reaching aliens who had given up all hope just hours before. "This is James Parker, aboard the Star's Edge," he said calmly. "The immediate threat has been eliminated. All surviving vessels, please report your status." The response was stunned silence for several long moments. Then Commander Vextal's voice came through, barely above a whisper. "Human, James, what have you become? That ship, those weapons. We watched you destroy something that wiped out our greatest fleets like they were toys." "I remembered what my people used to be," James replied simply. "And I learned that sometimes the most important discoveries are buried where no one thinks to look." "We owe you everything," Vextal said, his voice thick with emotion. "Our worlds, our families, our entire civilization, ... How can we ever repay such a debt? James smiled as he began transmitting data packages to all the surviving ships. I'm sending you first one technologies, medical advances, clean energy systems, and defensive weapons. Use them to rebuild what was lost and prepare for what's coming. What's coming? Another alien captain asked nervously. This was just the advance fleet, James explained. The main destroyer armada is still out there in the void between galaxies. But now we have time to prepare, and you have the tools to fight back. Commander Vexto's voice was humble now, filled with a respect that James had never heard before. James, ... When you first arrived, we called you a dirt digger. We mocked your primitive methods and your curiosity about old things. I remember, James said with gentle amusement. We were fools, Vexto continued. We thought intelligence meant having the newest technology and the fastest ships. We never understood that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from those willing to get their hands dirty in the mud. Laughter echoed across the communication channels, not the cruel mockery James had endured before, but warm, grateful laughter, filled with wonder and new understanding. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about judging others too quickly. As the Star's Edge began its journey to awaken other hidden First One ships, James looked out at the stars with new eyes. Humanity's true inheritance was just beginning to unfold, and the galaxy would never be the same.